Brandon Roberts. I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on the show. I love soundtracks. I love just listening to soundtracks. I love just putting the headphones in and working or working out or walking my dog. And I kept noticing, like, who works on these soundtracks that I love so much. And I oftentimes feel like the composers and the art in the music department don't get enough credit for what they do. And so I went on Gemini and I said, I want to, here are the films that I love. I want to interview somebody that worked on these. Who are the best people to work for? And you were number one.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And so you came up and I went, okay. So I went to Instagram, I looked you up and I said, and he's looked, oh my God, yes, perfect. So I followed you and then I reached out to you and then and now here we are. So thank you, AI.
Yeah, I had no idea. Like what you don't know though is that I actually have my name placed on every soundtrack that's ever been released, just for a scenario like this.
So the SEO is pulling.
Exactly. Yeah. I've actually never done any music for anything, but yeah. No, but thank you. That's actually very kind. So.
Well, thank you for answering and being so accessible, because, you know, in this world sometimes there are the types that won't even engage with anybody reaching out on socials. So
yeah.
And then of course I go on your IMDb and I'm just going down. I'm like, oh my God, yes,
right.
yes. And then I'm sending it to these guys going, oh my God, look at all these amazing films. And we could spend, this show will talk some about that, but amazing to have you here, and thank you so much for your time. And
well, thanks for having me, and a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And so typically I want to kind of jump off with kind of establishing how you got into your industry. Where did your love for composition, for film scoring start?
So I started as a jazz guitarist. So I actually have the world's most, let's say, I don't want to call it useless. That's not the right term, but I have a degree in studio jazz guitar. And at a certain point, when I was doing a lot of gigs and everything, and I loved it, I had this revelation that I didn't think this was going to be a viable long-term career, especially when the tip jar had like no money in it and it only had like a joint in it. It's like, I don't think this is going to work. So anyway, simultaneously, I was very much into writing pieces for jazz ensembles, and I was at USC, and they have one of the world's best film scoring programs. So I inquired about transferring into that for graduate, and it all worked out. I was probably the worst kid in the class. Like all my peers were amazing, all from different parts of the world. They're all amazing. Some of us are still really good friends today, but I had some serious catching up to do. So yeah, that was a heck of a year, like trying to catch up to that talent level.
And so, as a child, were you ever drawn to the music side of films, or
yeah,
what?
100%.
Yeah.
And so it made sense. Actually, it's funny you asked that, because it did make sense in hindsight, that shift, because I think my first cassette tape was like Karate Kid 2 or something. The first film score I remember like really just being blown away by was Empire Strikes Back. Mm-hmm. I listened probably more to film scores than I did to rock music or heavy metal. I did eventually start, maybe it was half and half, but film scores have always been like a huge part of my life. I just didn't realize that you could make a career out of it.
Yeah. And so do you remember what kind of, because I always had this moment where the soundtrack when I was a kid finally separated. There was that moment where it separated from the video to the actual. And for me, I had one of my first cassettes was Beetlejuice, mm-hmm. And I remember watching that film as a child. It finally separated. It was, oh my God, I'm watching a movie, but the music. And then I would no, focus on it's the picture, the music.
Yeah.
And so to me, I think that's when it really started separating. Did you have like a moment like that where you finally saw like, completely.
So for me, it was probably Return of the Jedi, where I really realized, this stands so much on its own. You don't even need the visuals. Mm-hmm. And in addition, the audio of the soundtrack creates the visuals in your head automatically. I knew exactly which part of the film I was in at any given time, just by listening to the soundtrack. And then I kind of realized. Then I think I truly realized the world of John Williams, and then you start just going down the rabbit hole. So you start discovering, Jerry Goldsmith. You start discovering John Barry, Thomas Newman, and then going way back, Korngold and all these guys, and all of a sudden you realize that, I just opened up Pandora's box on myself in terms of amazing talent.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that, because like even as a child, I remember watching. I used to love watching Alfred Hitchcock, and that that dun 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 dun, and I would be in another room, and you'd hear that, and you instantly all the visuals start creating. And so to me, sound has always been my first love. Funny enough, and now I'm not in filmmaking on the visual side, but I actually started out in a band, playing and learning tempo and learning dynamics and cadence and it's so funny, because when I finally said, I'm going to get into the filmmaking side, I found that it was very easy to understand pacing and everything else in the visual side, because I had so been ingrained into the music side. Yeah. And so when did you really start working into building into making films with your music?
So early on, I realized I had to advertise. So I go back to the days where you had to put like the poster up with the tags that you pull off the number, right? So you'd have your, you write your number in strips, or you'd print it off and then do the little cut it so that you could rip it. So I posted all of those, a bunch of those, Film Composer available, very cheap, where and put that at the USC film school, went over to like UCLA, put it in their film school. And I got a couple bites, and that was really good to kind of, try it out on a practical level while simultaneously learning about it at school. But I really hit the pavement hard. And so I made a lot of very helpful mistakes early on, learned on short films, and I apologize to all those directors in hindsight. But that helped me prepare on some level from a practical standpoint, from deadlines to notes, to notes, to realizing that there's multiple ways to score a scene, and also then on the flip side of that, trusting your first instincts as well. So, and then that just kind of segued right into what we were learning in school, and then eventually trying to work outside of that and for people higher up in the food chain.
And so what does the school system teach you about film scoring? Is it teaching you about tonality? Is it teaching you about themes? What motifs? What is the overall general that you would learn by going to a university as opposed to not?
For just speaking for USC, what the best thing was, one, being introduced to scores and scenes that you wouldn't have been familiar with, and why the scores work so well for that. Even if it's in a style you don't like, you can still see, like, you appreciate what it's doing for the scene dramatically. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect, and by far the biggest, was every couple weeks they would give us a scene. So it might be from a Charlie Chaplin film, it might be from Contact, like the Jodie Foster one. It might be from an action thing, and we'd have to rescore the scene, and then we'd have to record it with an orchestra or some version of an orchestra. And we did this every 2 weeks. So that's where USC really came through, was learning that whole process, which I remember many sleepless nights. I remember printing our own parts, like for the musicians, the night before at Kinko's, midnight. And so it becomes a huge bonding experience with your classmates, and you learn from what they did. You're like, whoa, we here's 20 of us. We all scored the exact same 2-minute scene, and yet here are 20 completely different versions of, like, and even musically interpreting that scene. And sometimes it was funny. Sometimes you'd have guys who were like, oh, I thought the kid with a knife was more threatening. I was like, what? What do you? What? So you'd even have arguments about what the scene itself meant. But so that was probably one of the most intense but wonderful years of my life, just just learning that whole process and being in the trenches with those people. And like I said, many of us are still friends and very good friends. So I don't think I would have gotten that in the same way outside of school. But I know plenty of people they go right into internships and they get kind of the same experience or similar experience.
Or like a Trent Reznor who just is so good at music that he just naturally segues into.
That's the rock star segue, which is its own career path in itself. So yeah.
And so you're getting all this experience through the UC system. What would be your biggest takeaway that you learned in that about your own creative voice in going through that whole process? Because when you have time to develop something and there's no deadline, you're kind of just meandering a little bit. But when there's strict deadlines, you really have to really focus on finding something now, sitting on something, and then developing that. What would you say as far as that 2-week process was your biggest takeaway?
Mine was I'm a perfectionist, but not in a healthy way. So I really had to learn scheduling my time. Hey, I have to be done writing at this point because I have to start orchestrating it and doing the parts so everything's ready. And so that was a good lesson in terms of knowing when to put down the pen and be we're done. This is, maybe it's not perfect, but the next one, take what you learned from this.
And so you're starting out as guitar, but I'm assuming when you're trying to write music for a score, it's
pretty much on the keyboard.
On a keyboard, right? And so did you have to teach yourself keyboard, or is it just naturally? Because it's all same keys laid out.
I still even now kind of bang away on it. It's nothing that
not
anyone.
Prokofiev.
No one would want to see that. But that's basically how I write in sequence is on that, and then I'll obviously grab other instruments here and there to supplement to it, but pretty much it's just to do the mock-ups so that then we can record. So. And
then are you learning to then write the music because your Kinko's printing out? Are you having to now sit there, compose, write, and then have to give it to somebody to play?
So the way it worked back then is there was back then I was still write a sketch, and then it had to be either orchestrated by myself or somebody else to then go through the process. Now you can basically write on your computer, and then that same information just gets translated over to the orchestrators and the copyists, who then keep it in their computer and then finally get it printed out. Oh. So it's the same. I want to say it's a different set of tools to do exactly the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And then so as you're coming out of college, the door is open and you're you're out in the wild, go. So what are you doing in that process of trying to figure out?
Yeah, well, that's where it doesn't matter if you've gone to college or not. That's the great equalizer. Mm-hmm. Everyone just winds up at the bottom and has to figure a way through it. Mm-hmm. Back then I sent out a ton of demo CDs. I did what worked for me, which was, a version of taking that number, ripping the number off. Well, I just sent out a lot of demo CDs and had a couple bites and had some good projects and everything, but at a certain point I couldn't make ends meet either. And then I asked engineer friend of mine if he had any work available, and I was able to get in as an orchestrator for Bear McCreary when he was on Battlestar Galactica. So I that kind of segued into doing additional music and writing on some of his stuff, and then shortly after that, I wound up segueing over to Marco Beltrami when he was on a TV show, and then right before he did Scream 4. So my timing was I was just
perfect.
Very lucky. But it was everything I learned. I'm synopsizing, but I'll just say that everything I learned along the way prepped me for the next thing. So I wouldn't have been ready to work for Bear had I not been used to, let's say, the schedules and what's required and basically delivering and following through. And I wouldn't have been ready to work for Marco if I hadn't had all the stuff I'd learned working with Bear. So every single thing preps you for the next part of your career. So I was very lucky from that standpoint.
And so when you're sending out these demos, what type of music are you it's all original? Are you instrumentation? And then who are you sending them to?
Yeah, so I mean, you send it. mean, back then you'd send it to the production company, you might send it to the director. Nowadays, I have an agent that sends stuff out, or pitches for certain things. But deciding what you're going to send is that never gets easy, because every film has its own idiosyncrasy. So it's a romantic comedy that has, but it's set in it's set in Cambodia. So but then you're like, oh, well, okay, well, how much local flavor do you want to add, or do I even have anything that has that traditional instruments? Is that exactly the opposite of what they're going for? So you wind up second guessing yourself, and in the end, I find that I would just send what I think is maybe the most appropriate, but then sometimes they just want to hear cool stuff, and you never know. And 9 times out of 10, they already have someone they're keeping in mind. Or they were kind of circling, or it's a cousin of the director's brother's friend. Yeah. So you never know. But I spent a lot of time trying to, and too much time overthinking putting together demos for stuff, whereas I probably should just be like, here's my best stuff. Even if it doesn't fit, you get the point. I can do that. But to this day, I don't know it's a mystery, because it's one man's trash is another man's treasure concept. So a track I'll put on the demo, I don't know, maybe it's too slow, maybe it's too sensitive, and then that might be the thing that gets me the gig. Whereas all the showy, expensive stuff with big orchestras, like they couldn't care less, or they actively don't want that a lot of the time. So,
yeah, they want to do a different direction, or
correct.
They want to go in this. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. And so as you start getting in your career going and you start working on these projects, what is the biggest thing that you're learning in that moment? Because I feel like if someone were to 10 years ago say, hey, come on this film set, that I would be very nervous. I'd be very scared. I'd be very, how do I get on this set? Who am I working with? How do I make sure that I look like I'm competent? What is your first plan of action when you get into working with a bigger film, I could say?
Well, fortunately, the post-production process, you tend to just follow the lead of the director. Occasionally, I'll get on a project where the producers are really involved, or occasionally the director's been kind of handed their hat and is no longer on the project. But for the most part, the director is your touchstone, and I found, especially watching how Marco Beltrami would do stuff, he was just great at making sure he listened to the director. It sounds so simple when you say it, but it's actually, sometimes it's hard to do. You have an idea what it needs. Sometimes you disagree with what they are thinking. Sometimes there's other voices in the room saying it should be like this, and he always just focuses on the director. And I think I learned a lot watching how he, come on over, let's talk through this. Like, what do you think? What are scores you like? What do you think about this? Here's a couple ideas. And so it becomes less overwhelming when you're dealing with one person that's kind of the captain of the ship, or supposed to be.
And so because right now I'm shooting a short film in June, and this is gonna be my first real big narrative short film. And I'm finally working with a composer. I've always dreamt about this. I watch all this BTS footage. I'm like, someday, I can't wait. That'd be amazing. And now that I'm here, I'm in these discussions about what the tone is, what the sounds are. And then it's hard for me as a director to go, oh my God, I love Daft Punk, Tron. Yeah. I love, I love, how do I, Clint Mansell. I love, how do I convey that to you? And so how is it difficult to work with in that parameter if a director doesn't know, or is it oftentimes once you get to that level, the director already knows and the sound is established? Or
I've had every circumstance. Sometimes they'll tempt something in that they're in love with, that you can tell they love that music, but it doesn't necessarily work with the movie. And that's a process of like, hey, I get that you love this music, but this style, but that's not really the film you have. It might not be the best for the film. And then there's other times where and this is probably more often than not, the director has an idea of the vibe already, and it's appropriate. So most of the time it's appropriate. So it's, and from that standpoint, I actually find it helpful to hear about the scores or the films that influence the vibe. So like I really love, like we were talking about Seven. So I really love Howard Shore's Seven score, or how it's dark here. But I also really like the score from Scream. Okay, so in my mind, what I would do is I would think, okay, well, Scream has almost this over the top. There's a hint of fun to the horror, right? But it's all very over the top. And then, but then I would think to myself, but then Howard Shore's Seven score is like extremely dark and just like foreboding and oppressive almost in an effective way. So somewhere in between, it's got to have elements of both of those. So you kind of always adding the flavors together and distilling it down. So that I find those discussions really helpful. But in the end, you still just have to try it, and you don't know until you try it to picture. And every gig, you think you're like, oh yeah, and then every single gig you start in, and it's like the first time you've ever scored something before.
Oh, I was gonna ask that.
Yeah. You never get better. Yeah, you get you make decisions faster of what when something's not working. Sometimes why, but every single film, man, it has its own challenges.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't want to come across as like a rookie as I'm talking to this composer, but also it's like I am still in that collaborative. I'm trying to figure it out, and if we haven't filmed a certain anything, I can't even audition sounds or music. And so right now it's like it's been almost putting the horse in front of the cart. Whereas like I'm listening, a lot of the times like I'm listening to Denny talking about Dune, and he's like, on my earlier projects, it's like you do all this time filming, and then the poor sound design and the composer's got 2 weeks, go, and trying to reverse that where you guys have more time to create. And so I think that's just been that takes a little pressure off me, hearing that it's every project starts at that type of feeling. Yeah. And so I guess it's just a matter of hearing out, collaborating. And is the collaboration still a big thing when you get to this level of what you're at, or is it
100%. That never goes away. That's great. Very rarely. I mean, and to be honest, like I worked with many directors that don't know at all exactly what something needs, and that's okay too. Mm-hmm. So you try stuff, and I think the one thing that every director I have worked with seems to know is when they're feeling something, and that's the whole point of music in a movie. Mm-hmm. If it's generating the feeling they want to have, even if it's unexpected, they're like, oh, I never would have thought of this music. However, this is the emotion I want to feel in this scene. Then you're in. I think one of the situations I find the most frustrating is when something's clearly working emotionally, but then there's a lot of second guessing it for multiple reasons that then wind up taking a good idea and having it, basically tossed out. So I like films where the music has a strong emotional voice, but sometimes that's not what the director wants.
And do you ever run into directors that say, I have this scratch track, can you make it sound like this?
Yeah.
And how frustrating is that? And I've done that to people, and I didn't know that I was...
It's about degrees. It's like there's times where it gets so bad that you kind of have to say, I'm sorry, like this is either license it but we're getting to the point now where you're, forget lawsuit territory. We're getting to the point where like you're dissecting even the sonic quality of the recording, and
I love the reverb in this. Can you do the exact same thing?
Yeah, and well, the reverb thing isn't even as bad as the like. Well, this sounds a little, to the point where you'd be embarrassed, and like I said, and you then put yourself at risk of a legit, copyright infringement, and so I found that sometimes it's best to either do something totally different. Like you say, okay, can you just get that out of your head for a second? Can we just try something different? And then, or try something inspired by, but ironically, a lot of times it just, they have everything about that piece in their head. And we call it temp love, where they just can't get out of their head.
I've definitely been guilty of that. And I try to, but also I've never really worked with a composer that can really flex all of that. Yeah. That full library of that. And so now that you're kind of getting in your career, did you have an idea of genre that you liked, or was were you just open to anything that came to you?
I was open to anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have things I was stronger at or weaker at.
Like
I
what
would,
would you
well, I
say?
would definitely not be the guy they would call for Tron. Like, I mean,
Daft Punk? No?
yeah, I love the music. I just can't write like that very well. And there's, and my strengths, ironically, is more lyrical. So like things that are pretty or melodic, that's actually my favorite stuff to do. And probably second, and then horror is probably second because it has so much freedom, musical freedom there.
And why would you say that horror is music freedom? And we were talking about this off
Yeah.
camera. Is when I watch a lot of horror, it's very the same tonality, it's the same instrumentation. But listening to a lot of your guys' work that you and Marco were doing, I'm seeing that you're exploring different areas.
Yeah.
So why is that?
Well, it took me a while to realize be able to explain why, but I think what it is horror. As long horror is like everyone's open to trying anything. Like it's odd. Like hey, you want to take 40 bananas and throw them into a lawnmower and record that and record the sound of the splatter, then reverse it and pitch it down, and that wants, people are down for anything and encourage it. And as long as the emotional impact is there, whether it's the scary vibe or a jump scare or whatever, they're pretty much open to trying almost anything. And that's it's been really, really nice. And also horror is such a huge genre. Like there's so many subgenres within it that I just find that horror directors seem to come into their films with a very open mind, very open musical mind, and it's just been a lot of fun. And you're right. You're right. It is a lot of similar stuff or similar gestures, but then at the same time, there's tons of room for exploration. Like on the Ice Cream Man thing I just finished with Eli Roth. Like it's like 70s. Like a good chunk of the score is like 70s. Throwbacks and toy pianos and kids singing. I mean, it's just so fun. I mean, you don't get to do that very often. So,
so what other horror films that you've worked on that you've absolutely just walked away going, I absolutely love that. That was such an amazing experience.
Okay, so working with Marco and Buck on A Quiet Place, that was a lot of fun working with them because they're amazing. I mean, they're just amazing creators. And I had a really good time on Thanksgiving with Eli Roth because he's like, I had an idea of Eli Roth in my head before I met him that was completely, I don't know where I thought of it, but that is not what he was like. Nicest, coolest guy. He's like a little kid when it comes to music. He's just giddy. He's like, ah! And so when someone's that excited about music, it's infectious, and it also makes you want to do better, more, try some ideas. And he's, that was a fun gig.
So when he brought to you Thanksgiving, what was the initial discussions with Eli? Did he have an idea of what he wanted to do, or was it more of like leaving it up to your interpretation? Or?
He let me just try some ideas. I sent him a bunch of initial like little kind of 2-minute long sweet things, or sweet 2 minutes. That's not really sweet, but it's like 2-minute little ideas. And I get this call from him, and he's like, "Dude, you got inside my brain." I say, "Is that good or bad?" But he can then very clearly, he's like, "I love this, but I think this is not the right." Okay, cool, and this is too electronic. Okay, got it, great. So going back to your idea of like, kind of distilling things down, based on score references. Well, in this, he's referencing my own tracks I sent to him, wow. So he's able to say like, "I like this from this. I think this is cool. I think blah blah blah." So. We just were able to whittle it down, and I kind of figured out from that what elements were working in the, and that's before I even scored the picture. So,
and had he shot anything at that point in time?
I think he was shooting or was early editing at that point. But but then once you start scoring the film, you kind of have to start over from because what you have in your mind is not necessarily what's going to be on screen.
Sure.
And so that's why sometimes writing to a script is a really bad idea, because you realize, oh my gosh, once you see the footage, nothing works.
That's what I was afraid of when I'm talking to this composer, because like we're having these discussions and like I can have all these ideas, but once I start seeing the picture and start laying, it might not even work.
Correct.
And so that's why I'm kind of trying to figure out, this is my first time. How do I become a better director? How do I become a better helper when I'm working with a composer? And so that's very insightful. And so with the sound being created, Eli's like, yes, I love this. Go to town on it. And do you typically have a good runway to create, or is it just here's the film, go, and you have?
No, it's good. I mean, he'll have some of it'll have temp score in it, kind of like a lot of times the editors will do temp score also to help them edit. Mm-hmm. And that'll inform certain things, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But in this case, like, that's, I think, the best thing about working with Eli is he pretty much gives me free rein to try stuff. And then if something's not landing, he'll tell me, obviously. But for some reason, we seem to have similar taste in music, at least what's working for each of his films, like that I've worked on with him. But and that actually goes to a important point, which has to do with taste. If you share the same musical and dramatic taste as a director, life is a whole another ball game, because you're not fighting. Like, you might come up with something that the director did not expect, but you can have a similar taste in terms of how it's dramatically functioning musically and in the film. And so from that standpoint, I think when you land on those relationships, that's why I think you see a lot of repeat business. So like Denny and Hans, or obviously John Williams and Spielberg, or John Williams and George Lucas. Like, I think there's a shorthand there. Like, they know what to expect. They might be surprising, but they trust that person's dramatic taste and how it translates to music. So those are the relationships to hold on to.
And do you notice that a lot of directors have a musical background, or is that you've worked with? Or
it's all over the place. Mm-hmm. Like Tony Gilroy on Andor, he does completely. Like, he knows exactly what he's talking about. And then I've worked with directors that'll come right out and say, I know nothing about music, so I can talk to you in terms, I can't even use musical terms. No problem. Sometimes that's even better. So
I could do a beat bada boo 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 boo.
It would never do that. No, like they'll say, I think it should be like, darker, and it needs to like maybe pick up here. Got it. I know exactly what you mean. We need to like pick up the tempo, some sort of forward motion here. It's too, so I actually find that stuff just as helpful. And then we have we call them like the dangerous directors, which are like the ones that know just enough to use the terminology incorrectly. So you'd be like, there's like, what about if we, I don't know, like what if we
crescendo on this?
Crescendo down a few BPM. Yeah. You're like, got it. All right. Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
this. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. It's anyway. But
I had an experience like that. We were scouting the location, and I was talking to my DP, and I do camera as well, but I'm all on Sony's and Sony lenses, so I have like a 24 to 70, and so as we're talking, I'm like, yeah, we'll probably just use like a 70 here. And then he keeps like smiling. And then I'm like, what's so funny? He's like, oh, I love when directors try to tell me lenses. He's like,
right.
It's usually like 65 or 85. The 70 is like I was like, oh, okay, well, you know what I mean, right? So
yeah, exactly. You know what I mean. Either way, no matter how we got there.
Exactly. That's exciting. And so let's talk a little bit about the renaissance of horror. Why do you think we're seeing such an explosion right now? And all these amazing, from Sinners to Weapons to all these movies are seeming to. Is it a budget thing? Do you think, or?
Well, one of the benefits of living for a while is you get to see repeat, like resurgences of movements. So when I was young, the Scream was like the resurgence, right? So horror was in sequel just purgatory, like it was just dying. And when Scream came along, that generated like 10 to 15 years of just nonstop
Saw and all these other. Yeah,
well, yeah, I mean, even before that, you had like Urban Legend, and you had all these films that it was I Know What You Did Last Summer, Final Destination films.
Yeah.
They all kind of like, I feel. I mean, I'm sure there's tons of people who disagree with this, but I feel like a lot of that stemmed from Scream, the offshoot of Scream.
Agreed.
And then, but then you'll have that might come down, and then all of a sudden you have like what were I suddenly forgot the name of all the movies that were totally silent and they were shot like not Blair Witch, but like all the
Paranormal Activity.
Thank you. All the Paranormal Activity films.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother genre now. It's like
true.
people are like, this is unbelievable, and it is. I mean, it's scared. I can't. As much as I love horror, I can barely watch those on my own.
Me too.
I remember like in my own house, like
you
looking like an
open the
idiot.
refrigerator.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I'm gonna close the refrigerator. There's gonna be something there. Okay.
Exactly. Why am I panning around my own, like slowly around my own house? So then you have, and then you'll have things like Robert Eggers. So you have like The Witch when that came out, and so you have these. I want to say they're like these movement, or it's almost like someone reinjects a genre that's always there, but reinjects it with like this adrenaline of inspiration. And and I would argue The Conjuring was another huge thing that created that kind of gave a resurgence to the Exorcist vibe, right? So all those like 70s films. So I would say that what we're seeing now is yet another version of that with the directors that are so good in with their craft and such a high level of filmmaking across the board, whether it's cinematography, the writing, obviously the music, like if you're talking about Sinners, and I love the weapons score because they found a way to do horror and comedy and percussive. It's percussive, it's wacky, it's so cool. And then what Ludwig did on Sinners is, I think it's going to go down as one of the most important scores of the last 10 to 20 years. It's just, what an accomplishment.
Amazing.
So I think studios are willing to take a risk on these amazing directors who just happen to be working in horror and are delivering these unbelievable masterpieces that I would argue fly under the radar of massive tentpole films, and so they have more freedom and less studio oversight, I'm assuming. So I think horror gets away with a lot more sometimes than, let's say, like a Marvel movie in terms of studio oversight.
And so you did The Nun, right? Nun 2?
Nun 2. Yeah,
and
worked on it with Marco.
And so when you're getting approached by a horror piece, how do you go about trying to create something that's not cliche? Because I feel like as a creator myself, I'm constantly fighting not doing the same thing that I've already done, and then also not doing something that's already established. And I find it very difficult. I really do. And it's like constantly, how do I reinvent? When something like that comes across your table, I know Marco is also kind of spearheading in that maybe in that sense. But how do you go about finding new ways to create music?
I find it there's two simultaneous things. Let me step back. I think, but even before that, it's what does the movie need? So sometimes the movie doesn't need a wheel reinvention, and most of the time it doesn't. So then it goes to these other two questions, which is what is the theme? Which is that I think of the theme as totally separate, like something you can just sing, totally separate from, let's say, any of the instruments being used. And then you have the palette. So the palette is all the weird sounds. Like, is it orchestra? Is it strings? Is it weird voices? And so does it work with the theme? And so the best advice I ever heard was, which I find is true, is you have to add like 10% something new, right? So we like to think we're reinventing the wheel, but we're actually not. And most of the time, that 10%. This is my wife. It was my wife that told me this. So she said, in her experience working on certain projects, you have to have that 10%. It's essential, but it's not as much of a wheel reinvention as maybe we all think. But if you don't have it, then it's about as generic as you can as it can be. So I spent a lot of time on the 10%, trying to get the melody right, which is, its own thing, but then so much time on the palette. So like this film I'm on now, it's a bunch of prepared piano. So I got a piano into the studio, just completely opened it up, and we're trying every possible thing, whether it's magnets or, carpet pads in there and hitting it with weird stuff. See that is my palette for this film, for example.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I love that. And so each film in this genre, in horror specifically, it allows you a little bit of freedom to play, not even just the instrument the way it's intended, a piano, but getting in and mucking around with it and playing with it. Yeah. I think there was a gentleman I saw he created his own instruments, and they've been used in a lot of horror movies, but it's like a saw bow, and he's like, and seeing these type of things, I was like, I think that genre looks so fun because you can create. Yeah.
Look at what like Mark Horvan did for The Witch. He had that apprehension engine built where it's like he finally said, I just want basically like a horror instrument I can play that has a bunch of, and he had this thing built, and it's iconic. Like, it's so cool.
I think that's the video I was referencing. Yeah, watching that, I was like, wow, all the different sounds that it can create. And then, of course, you can throw some compression, throw some reverb, and just effects. Muck it up. Yeah. That's amazing.
But you get the feeling of, like, performing a horror score, which I thought was so cool. When he said that, he's like, I just want to be able to just tactily play something and have it sound like horror as opposed to...
some stem that you're kind of trying to recreate.
Correct.
Yeah. And then when I was listening to A Quiet Place 1 and 2, the soundtrack, I was also noticing that the soundtrack also had sound design in a sense. Like there would be a sound like, and like you would hear tonal type sounds that are hitting. And I was like thinking, this is really, really cool because from my understanding, there's like a separation from sound design and in composer in music, right? And when I was listening just with my headphones, I was literally hearing certain scenes happening and sounds hitting. Is that something that is kind of you're bringing into the project, or are you working hand in hand with the sound design? Or
anything that like if you're listening to the soundtrack, anything on the soundtrack is going to be stuff that was just part of the score. And then it might have, especially in like, let's say a horror film, it might have elements that sound designy, but the sound design, there's a whole another side that's just their sound design. Sometimes they mesh together. Like let's say there's a big sting. The sound department might hit it super hard and have all this, these other sounds in addition to the music hitting it. But the things I love the most is when the sound team is in deep early conversation with the music team, and we say, like, what are you covering and what am I covering? Because the best stuff is when you realize, no, let sound cover this moment, and then music will come in here and be way more effective if this is silent. And I'm like, Quiet Place is a great example where like there's so much silence, so much music got taken out of the movie, but it works so well doing that. And then I had the same lesson with Eli on Thanksgiving. There was this long sequence, and I had done something I thought was so cool. And then at one point I saw that he goes, we're going to mute all of this. And I was like, what do you mean? And what do you mean?
That's my baby.
Yeah. What do you mean? What do you mean mute? You mean like lower the volume, or do you mean mute? So he mutes it, and I see it. And of course my little ego is just screaming out for just a second. But then after that calms down and you watch it. And then especially when I watched it in a theater, I said, I learned so much from that one moment, realizing how effective, because the music landed 10 times harder when it finally came in, and the tension was unbearable during that sequence when it was silent and you're only hearing sound. And then when the music does come in, the music's cranked, so it has way more effect. So I over the years, I found that silence, where music is placed, is just as important as and when it's silent, it's just as important as the music when it finally does come in. And actually, Tony Gilroy, same thing on Andor. He's like, do not score the whole conversation. Score, he'll have these giant long monologues. He's like, come in here. This is the point where we bring the music in. Whereas I think some people, the instinct might be to score from the beginning of the conversation. He's like, no, come in here. Let all this be dry. And
or start low and crescendo as they go in. But yeah. But if you're leaving it out, that's amazing.
Yeah. Leaving it out completely is like, oh,
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
I'm just gonna go home then.
Yeah,
Okay, fine.
yeah.
Yeah, you don't need me.
Exactly.
Apparently, you don't need me.
Wow, I've been working way too hard all this time.
I was only up to 1 a.m. working on that part. No big deal.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the funny thing is, I think then everyone, it has the secondary effect of people thinking, wow, what a team player. He's willing to mute his own stuff. So the guy's a class act. But it's...
And you're in the bathroom destroying
exactly.
things.
Yeah.
Like
That's going on the soundtrack.
Yeah.
I don't care. So,
That's amazing. Do you... Is it always a goal, or is it a goal to create a soundtrack that stands alone from the project? Because when I sit down, I listen to like I said, Daft Punk for Tron, or Dust Brothers for Fight Club.
Right.
I literally can put these on and just zone out. And is that when you sit down to compose? Is that kind of an idea that you want to achieve, or is it just per project type?
You never know where it's all going to land, right? And sometimes, but what I do always try to do is make the soundtrack, like I'll try to have a few pieces I record that are like the main themes, and those get recorded away from the picture. They might be used in the end credits, but just here's a presentation of what like the elements, what is the DNA of the score in some thematic idea that's hopefully stands alone from the picture. And then I'll definitely try to do, instead of releasing every track, I'll try to edit stuff together and make it a better listening experience. I know there's a lot of people that release everything, and I couldn't. I mean, sometimes that's great. Like I remember when John Williams they finally released like the whole special edition like of the original trilogy. I was like, I've been waiting for that for 20 years, but.
So it's like more extended because obviously there's scenes, but
Correct.
you get like a 4-minute long piece as
Correct.
opposed to a 20-second, 30-second.
Exactly. Or they just didn't release some of those cues before. So what I tend to do is I try to think of the soundtrack as I'd rather have a shorter sound. I'd rather be the band that ends the set one song early than stays one song too long. So I generally get rid of the fat, and then only put the best stuff on, and then or the stuff I think is the best. But everyone has a different opinion on that, and they're all valid because there is something to be said for just listening to a score in order, unedited. And
then who do you listen to soundtrack wise? That's kind of contemporary. Because I mean I've been listening to The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo a lot. I've been listening to a lot of Fincher stuff. Like I love Atticus Ross and Trent's stuff. I mean, and it's like almost becoming cliche where I'm now seeing a lot of influences of that. But are there records or soundtracks that you're listening to?
Yeah. So I really like Ludwig's stuff. I think like the Oppenheimer soundtrack was. I remember hearing that for the first time and like, oh man, this is like the kind of stuff that makes you want to retire, or give up because it's just so next level. But and then I forgot his name, but the guy that does was it Poor Things and Begonia, the guy's amazing. Like I don't even know how he comes up with half of that stuff. But I of course I can't think of everyone I'm listening to right now, but I also listen to a lot of older stuff too. Like I love Jerry Goldsmith, and you hear the cojones those guys had back then, and you're like, how did you get away with this? So I there's so many, and then I listen to a lot of not film scores. Like I love, I still love my Radiohead, and I love my old Metallica, and so it kind of runs the gamut, and then I always am happy when people recommend stuff to me, because I think I have found as I've gotten older, there's a tendency, especially, and if you do music as a career, there's a tendency sometimes to want to break. Like if you spend all day doing it, and so sometimes I need to be nudged. Hey, check this out. It's something new. All right, but then I listen to it, I'm like, oh my gosh. So I have also found myself going out and seeing more live music that's like what younger folks are doing now. It's just unreal. Like. And you can hear all the influences, but in a good way. You're like, oh, cool! You found a way to mix that with this genre and this. That's so neat. So I'm sure every generation has that feeling where they hear I remember my dad, like the first time he heard Guns N' Roses. So he grew up in the '60s, but he hears Guns N' Roses and he was like, "Oh man, this is amazing!" I was like, "What? You like Guns N' Roses?" So I think that's that moment when you realize like the next generation is doing stuff that's so cool that so I always welcome being introduced to it, and sometimes that it comes in unexpected ways, but a lot of the young film composers, oh my gosh, like I could never compete. I'm glad I'm like
established. Where you're at,
I'm glad I'm on my way out. So.
And then are you learning new instrumentations? Are you learning or is it all now just keyboard based, MIDI based?
I don't would say learning new instruments as much as like I like deep diving something on each film. Mm-hmm. So I might not do it well, but I love getting an instrument or a thing for that film and kind of just exploring all the sounds you can make with it. So I would not call that learning the instrument. I would call that more abusing it in the end. But I do find that really fun. And then even if I can't play it, I do try to use an instrument that, like, even if I have to use samples in the meantime, but then we record with them later. And oh man, there's some, like on Nun 2, we used a recorder, and I always think of recorder as like, kids nightmare concert. But played well and with different types of recorders. I mean, it was one of the most unbelievable things I've ever heard. So, you realize like how much there is out there to explore and try. And it's as humbling as it is, it's also incredibly inspiring. You get a good person on any instrument and it's going to be inspiring dramatically. And
when you were working on Andor, were there instrumentations or what new thing did you bring to when you were working on Andor that you hadn't done before? Okay, so
cymbalum, which is this like Hungarian instrument, and you kind of play it with mallets. It's like a piano crossed with a dulcimer. And then we used a bunch of like trash, like I don't know how else to say it, like trash cans and hubcaps and all this kind of stuff. We used that for during sequences on Yavin.
And what inspired that? Like, how did you come up with? I mean, because there's banks and banks and banks of sounds that you can. But how did that?
Yeah, some of it was from Tony. Like some of it was from John Finkley, the music editor. He had some thoughts on it that I was like the cymbalum thing. I think was his idea, and it was like, hell yeah, this will work great for this whole sequence. And so so a lot of it, and then some of it's trying stuff out on your own. Like I thought, for the Mina Rao stuff, seeing all that wheat, I just immediately think of. Appalachian Spring and Aaron Copland. So I wanted to do something like with strings and just solo horns and solo trumpet. So sometimes the imagery makes you think of it. Yeah. In the case of the Yavin, like trash and junk stuff, the characters were acting like such buffoons that were like, well, and Tony was like, well, Yavin's in its infancy. There's nothing there. It's a construction site. And then it was like, what if we use, literally construction or junk, and then play it in a way that's kind of like almost how kids would play it, and it wound up being,
And so, are you bringing this stuff into a Foley room and kind of, or what is the process of like, hey, what kind of junk am I like?
No, I'll have sample libraries of stuff that kind of sounds like junk, and then we had like 4 percussionists out there. They brought all their stuff at the sessions, and I mean, we were laughing. Oh, what about this? What is that? Is that stolen? Like it looks like someone's.
It's a hubcap.
Yeah,
I'm missing a hubcap,
exactly.
Just like that. Yeah.
And they had at one point. There's this instrument called an onklong where you shake it and it makes this weird rattling sound. And I'd seen them in music shops. Oh, that's cool. I don't know how you could use that. Well, you have 4 percussionists all with different ones going. I mean, it creates this amazing sound. So. So a lot of it, and sometimes we take their suggestions, like, hey, what do you guys think? And they're like, well, check this out. And you'd hear a bunch of rattling, and then it sounds like someone going through their steamer trunk, and then they would have this cool sound. It was like, might be like metal mallets on these like metal bowls or something like that. So it was very exploratory. But these percussionists too, they've done this for so long that they're like a library, but of amazing musical instruments, and then they can play the crap out of them. I mean, it's just phenomenal.
So before working on Andor, you hadn't done anything like that before, and then
not with like a level of junk like that, and also not performed with. That's the other thing I think that's important is like having 4 guys play together. You just they play off of each other, right? And that's the part. I think that's the part that I sadly think in our career we don't get as much of is that like ensemble playing to get for inspiration. You can't get that any other way.
Because a lot of it is you just go in your own little. You're isolated doing your own thing.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. So that's the part where the recording sessions really make the music come alive. And if you can get everybody playing off each other, it can be so fun.
Interesting. And so when's the last time you heard a soundtrack that you walked away going, man, I wish I created that? Because I every time I watch Dune, I walk away going, I should just quit. I'm so far away from that. Like, how do you maintain your inspiration and continue to grow?
Yeah, no, I have that almost every movie.
It's crazy because your work is so...
It like feeling, I mean, if you want to call it imposter syndrome, I most of the people I know struggle with it all the time. And they'll say, oh, well, that thing that you did. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I was like, that took me like 10 minutes. So it was like, I could never do that. It's like, what? So you never, your strengths, I'm saying this and I know it's true, but I don't believe it because I don't feel it, which is everyone's has their strengths and everyone has their weaknesses, but you just tend to focus on your weaknesses. And I know the truth is that you wouldn't get this far by sheer luck, let's say, or you wouldn't have a career for this long, if it was only luck, but it sure feels like that sometimes. And I remember James Newton Howard one time, when I was at USC, he spoke at one of our classes and he said, now imagine this is like the height. I mean, not that he's ever had a down point, but this is like the height of his career. So he's just doing M. Night Shyamalan stuff. He's just knocking out all these iconic scores left and right. And like, there's James Newton Howard, a guy's a legend. And he says, and I think he had just started working on King Kong or just finished it. And he said, every film, I always wonder if this is the film they're going to realize I'm a fraud.
Wow.
And that meant hearing it coming from him, especially that early in my life, that was incredibly helpful because you realize, okay, if he can feel it, then one, it's not uncommon, and two, then that's okay.
Are there moments when you're creating a soundtrack that you're like, I have to turn something in and I don't know what the fuck I'm doing?
Oh, totally.
And tell me, like, how do you, like, that's got to be.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we'll run it by our friends. Sometimes you get help. Like, I mean, if there's something that is just so out of your wheelhouse, sometimes you'll get help. Have someone help you write it. Sometimes if it's sometimes you just I term you to write the shit out, which is like sometimes you just got to write the piece and finish it, and then put it to the side, move on to something else, and come back. And ironically, many times I've come back to something and so certain it was crap and realized that, oh wow, this actually works. I just needs a little bit of this and this and that. It just the feeling of incompetence while you were making it overshadowed the ability to objectively look at it as good. So you look at it 2 days later, with zero expectations and oh, this actually was the right thing. It just needed a little extra finesse.
Care.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I'm the opposite. I'll sit and work on some music. I'm like, in the heaven, this sounds so amazing. And then I'll come back the next day and like, what the heck is this? Is crap. It's all just no sonic space. It's just completely just jam packed and everything.
Yeah. Same thing for me. Yeah. It never goes away. It's amazing.
And so that kind of segues to with AI now. Now that I'm kind of been working on my own stuff. Yeah, I have stock music that I use, and there's this new function that you can just hit a button and say, tell me what you want, and I'll make it for you. Is there a fear right now in the music world for films that AI will replace jobs?
Yeah, I was definitely talking about it. I don't know enough about it compared to. I do have colleagues that are know way more about it and have like practically like they can do stuff to show me like what you can do or whatever. And I like they'll send me like mock things they've done as a a joke, and you see the potential. My take on it is and I'm speaking completely out of ignorance, but this is speculatory, if that's a word. One, I think, like for me, I'm fortunate that I'm on, let's say, the latter half of my career, right? So I don't think it'll affect me as much as maybe people just starting out. But then, and so maybe I would be weeded out because of that. But then at the same time, I think a lot of the younger people coming in will learn to use it as a tool set. So certain things I mean, there's no doubt stuff will shift. But the question is it game over everything,
doom,
exactly.
doom.
Or is it just yet another tool set? Because I remember when, for a long time, music, like we're talking about the music going in front of the parts that go in front of the musicians. Those are all hand copied on these beautiful penmanship on this vellum paper, and then it was duplicated on like blueprint machines. And at a certain point, that all segued into computers, and you just print out the part on the computer. And all those people stopped doing it that way. Did that mean that music copying disappeared as a music preparation disappeared? No, it shifted dramatically. So I don't. This is a long way of saying I don't know, man. I really don't know, and I think I don't know any. I haven't met anyone that knows either. I've just seen some of the possibilities, and it's pretty impressive. I mean, we're past the point of it being a novelty,
or theoretical, right? It's not being practical.
And I think there's certain industries that are more at risk. So I think, and I could be wrong on this, but I would think that like sound design might be more at risk, because music still is so linear, whereas a lot of sound design is moment based. So maybe like, spit out 45 versions of this. Might be easier to do than, hey, we need a piece of music that's 2 minutes long that does this and then hits this moment at this minute and has this tempo and has violent, like that's way more
hands
prompts.
On, right?
Yeah, like so we'll see. One thing I do think though is directors will always want, when they can, to have like a written score, but there might be certain things like who knows, maybe jingles. Maybe they won't be hiring composers for jingles anymore, and that'll just be like spit out 500 versions of a jingle in a minute.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because even my preliminary, just checking it out on one of the episodes I was working on for my motorcycle documentary, I had tried working with it, and it was so I took more time trying to prompt it than I could have just go find well, you're always digging through crates essentially, but it was just not anything that I wanted. And granted, this was probably a year ago, so I'm sure the technology is caught up by now. But I definitely wanted something to start, in a more percussive kind of 4/4 percussive, but and then the melody comes in at 1 minute, and then I love this moment where it drops and then it sits there for 2 measures, and then here comes the big. And I just could not get anything like that.
Yeah.
And then it just kept doing its own thing. And then it was just so frustrating to me that I ended up just going and digging and, Frankensteining a couple different things together. And so, as I'm seeing this, my initial reaction to AI, especially in the filmmaking space, was I'm freaked out. Like, here we go. Like, I've worked my entire career, my ass off to get to where I am. And now it's just going to be wiped out by a bunch of AI prompts. But I'm noticing more and more that I'm getting super frustrated with it, and it's just not spitting out what I want.
Yeah.
And then also, like, I got into this because I want to work with people like you. I want to collaborate. I want to, engage, and I want to think and be presented with things that I've never even thought of. And I think, from the creative perspective, I think a lot of us are all sharing that same thought. But then on the user side, I'm asking people, does this matter to listen to AI music? And then they'll, it depends, I guess. If they're just going about their day, it doesn't really matter. But if they're going to want to sit and immerse themselves in a film, they want to know that this is being catered towards this experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think my fear is kind of going down as I'm talking to more people like yourself. It's coming down, down, down. And it is, like you said, becoming more of a tool in that sense, as opposed to wiping us out.
Yeah, I think your comment too about like working with people, like, you know, the music industry had times where, or just speaking of film scoring industry, where scores were, it was the whole thing to have like super electronic scores. And then at a certain point, the pendulum swung the other way. It's like, let's go back to live musicians. We missed that. So you just can't get that. You can get it close, but it's never there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I mean, I've heard that so much that that itself is starting to sound like a cliche. It's, well, we'll see. Cause I just don't know anyone that knows yet.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm not on the front lines of it. I'm sure there's people that know exactly where it's headed, or at least have an idea, but it hasn't hit my industry terribly yet that I know of. You know, at least with my peer group. So
yeah, I think just like the idea of also like, I burnt down 4 acres of rainforest to get this soundtrack. Listen, check it out. Like, subscribe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time and energy. Do you have anything that you wanted to plug, or anything that you're working on, or?
Well, I do. Yeah. No. I mean, the only thing I would say is Eli Roth's The Ice Cream Man coming out in August. It's pretty fun. It's absolutely batshit. The man has been completely taken off the leash, and but you can tell he's had a lot of fun with it. So. And
so, how long did you work on that?
Oh, maybe like 2 to 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we had a blast. So I mean, it's wild. It's got like Snoop Dogg did some actual score stuff on it, which was like I get this text from Eli. He's like, I got to play this for you because like Snoop sent me this and blah blah blah. Listen, like, this is really cool. Like, so it's really bizarre. So it's like some of it's me, then it might shift into like a Snoop Dogg section. It's just bizarre, but it all works. Like, I don't know why, but it all works really well.
So Snoop Dogg was playing instruments, or was he?
He had sent in some kind of, he did these like kind of cool horror tracks. Like, they definitely have like more his vibe to them. Mm-hmm. Like, you can definitely tell when it's not, let's say, not me or something, but but right in the movie when we need a different, like, I feel like you've exhausted Brandon. Like, it's just, God, please, we need a palate cleanser. He just comes slamming in with this cool track, and it was really neat.
And is he lending his voice to this? It's like, or is it more instrumental?
That is just instrumental.
Wow.
And then I think there is a song that he's on as well, but that's like in credits. But it was really neat, and I think it's like that thing I was saying with Eli. People like to collaborate with him because he makes you feel giddy, like a kid again. I mean, this is messed up. I would, don't get me wrong. No kid is gonna be able to see this, but it's really fun, man. He's a good guy.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I really appreciate your work. I appreciate your time,
thank you.
And I had a great time learning the ins and outs of how this all works. So.
Well, thank you for having me, and anytime. So.